Hi, I'm Brian Strumke from Stillwater, and this is the Brewer to Brewer podcast from All About Beer. My guest today is Spencer Guy from Atrium Brewing in Louisville, Kentucky. He's here for a conversation that goes beyond the brew house into topics that matter to brewing professionals and curious beer drinkers. First, please visit allaboutbeer.com and follow on social media at allaboutbeer. And to support journalism in this space, check out allaboutbeer.com/support. We'll get into this conversation in a moment, but first, this message.
Next time you're going through your books, check and see how much you're paying for brewery software. Odds are you're paying way too much. Ollie is the fastest growing brewery software that is saving brewers time and money while delivering the tools they need to grow their business. Learn more at getollie.com/pod. That's getollie.com/pod.
I'm Bradley Zimmerman from Badger Hill Brewing in Shakopee, Minnesota. Malta Mexico 2-Row is the first of its kind, so I was excited to try it out and see how it performed in the brew house. We had just brewed Mucho Gusto, our Mexican lager, so we used Malta Mexico in our American light lager called Longhorn. It performed well in the brew house. There's a little bit of toasted, flaked rice and then some rice syrup solids in the kettle and a touch of dextrin in the beer as well, and that's it. So it's basically showcasing Malta Mexico 2-Row. We normally use a Pilsner malt in that beer, so we got similar notes to a Pilsner malt, but we got a little bit more cracker out of it. A little bit of not toast and not bread dough, kind of somewhere in between. It had a pleasant sweetness to it, but it wasn't cloying or anything like that. It performed well in the brew house. We hit all our numbers as far as efficiency goes, so we were happy with the results there. If you're doing Mexican-style lagers, Malta definitely helps tell the story, especially since it's grown and malted in Mexico. No one's ever done that to this date, so it's fun to get people excited about that process and where things are going. We definitely like to tell that story. Contact Malt Europe today and visit maltingco.com.
All right, let's get into it. A bit about my guest today. Spencer Guy is the head brewer and founding member of Atrium Brewing in Louisville, Kentucky. Since opening in 2020, Atrium has become known for its bold fruited sours, crisp lagers, and ever-evolving IPAs. Before Atrium, Spencer cut his teeth as head brewer of Acasa, following years of home brewing and working on the distribution side of the industry. Spencer, how's it going?
Happy to be here. What's up, Brian? Thanks for having me.
Okay, so let's see. I moved to Louisville, Kentucky around this time last year. One of the first new faces in the beer industry that I met was Mr. Spencer. The Atrium Brewery happens to be just catty corner across the street from the office space that I work out of, that we affectionately refer to as the farm. So I find myself just kind of gravitating over there in the middle of the day just for a break. And for a while when I first moved here, the office wasn't ready, and I was just kind of like using Atrium's tap room to work out of it because they open at 11 o'clock on most days during the week. I think it was then when Spencer approached me because I was only drinking like one or two of his beers, and I'll let him take it from here because it's kind of a fun story.
I saw you in my tap room a few times, and I thought, I think that's Brian. What's he doing in my tap room twice in the same week? And he's still drinking the same beer that he was drinking last time he was here. So, yeah, I just kind of sat down with Brian and said, hey, why are you just drinking my core IPA? Like, we make a lot of other fun beers, and I think I might have put 20 beers in your face that day, and I think it's been history ever since.
Yeah, Spencer is known for probably like half of the roster of the beers at Atrium. When I first went there, it kind of frightened me because there was a lot of like fruit heavy, like parfait sours is what you're kind of known for, and various other like extremely fruited things. But then after Spencer, kind of had me sit down and at least like take a sip of each one, I realized that he was adding a sense of nuance and refinement to kind of a beer style that I've definitely like kind of shunned for a lot of the, in the past few years. And that's one of the things, that's why I wanted to bring him on the show. I think, Spencer, how old are you now?
31.
31. All right, I'm going to turn 49 next month. So yeah, I kind of wanted to, instead of like digging back into the archives with some brewing legend, I thought it would be cool to kind of push things forward and kind of share some of the perspective coming from the newer brewers that I think have been well attuned to classic styles and then innovating in a modern environment. So Spencer, that being said, what is, you guys make a lot of fruited sours, amongst other things, and we'll get to all that throughout. But first, I kind of want to ask you about your approach, because we've worked on multiple projects together, and you're very good on tweaking and refining beer even after fermentation before it goes to package, and you have a very dialed in palate. So like, what's your average everyday approach to beer completion?
Well, I think if we're just, first and foremost, like for every beer we make, the number one goal is balance. And we can make a really, really sweet beer with a ton of fruit, but if it doesn't have the acidity to balance it and the acidity to match the fruit that we're working with, it doesn't come across as that fruit that we're working with, and it doesn't come across in a drinkable way. So I've been through the ringer on fermenting fruit and adding fruit cold side and adding things to the kettle, and I have a pretty good kind of formula for where to start with a lot of these beers. But at the end of the day, we kind of approach it in a culinary stance of, we can always add more, but we can't really take anything out. So, for example, if we're doing, a peach pie beer, a nice in the whirlpool, like dropping some cinnamon sticks in there is like pretty cool. We're going to get some nice cinnamon from it, but we kind of have to do that a whole bunch of different times to figure out how much cinnamon sticks to do. Is it too much? Is it not enough? So, a lot of times on these beers, the way I approach them in the last, 5 years or so is we deal with that stuff in the bright tank and we add it very, very slowly. And we run a lot of benchtop trials before we're scaling something up and actually putting it into the tank. And even if we get something to a point that we want it to be, we'll still scale that back. When we do the math, we'll still scale that back before we put it into, a bright tank, something like cinnamon or something like lime or lemon or, whatever it may be. And wait for a recirc, wait for an integration before we make the call to add a little bit more, because I feel like things certainly scale up differently from your 16-ounce benchtop trial to your 300 600 gallon bright tank edition. So we just very slowly adding things and tweaking them to where we would like them to be. And on the subject of fruited sour, like there's more than half the brewers in the country have to make fruited sour right now to keep the lights on. And um, I think there's a lot of brewers that approach it like this is a raspberry beer that I have to make to keep the lights on. Where like I can still kind of put my head in the mindset of the consumer and approach it in a way that by the time it's done, like I still think it has balance. I could still do 12 ounces of it, and there's still again, like balance, nuance, integrity, and a drinkability factor that doesn't come with a lot of these sweet pastry driven fruit beers anymore.
Yeah, I noticed even the even the ones that are on the sweeter side with you, they're still refined. It's not like just a bunch of fruit puree like clogging up the draft lines and making sludge in the bottom of cans. I'm almost never seen anything kind of like, stratify, I guess.
Stratify, yeah.
Stratify, yeah. But either way, I mean, it's just like that was, if there was any style that I kind of really kind of turned my nose up on, it was when everything just started becoming smoothies. But then I realized that, like anything, like, you know, if you do put yourself in the minds in the headspace of the consumer, um, and also as a chef, you know, like in a culinary aspect, you can, you know, beer can be very much manipulated. You know, I've done that plenty of that in my days, um, and this is just,
Well,
you know, a new approach
that's
to
the
it.
thing. Like we're not just manipulating fruited sour in Bright Tank. You know, sometimes we send hazy IPA to Bright Tank, and pH is a little bit higher than we'd like it to be, and we find like a little bit of citric acid and a little bit of tweaking there, and spending the extra 30 minutes or the extra hour on that beer, whether it's fruited sour or lager beer or IPA, like just spending that little bit of extra time in Bright Tank to adjust pH to where your target was intended. We take really good beers to great beers that way. And if you can't take that time to spend on it, like you could probably still make pretty good beer, but we like to take a good beer and make it great.
Yeah, I notice every time I'm over at the brewery, you know, you're always, whether I want to even sample it or not, like you're throwing everything in my face, and and I'm there for it. And it's always good. It's a good mental exercise in how to adjust and tweak and refine beer, and it's because it's not all just done after fermentation. And
And
there's a
it's
lot
tough
to,
when you're not a really big brewery and you don't have this whole big sensory team. Like when you walk into my brewery, Brian, and you're drinking West Coast Pilsner, and I'm throwing blueberry lemon sour in your face and I'm asking your opinion on it. I'm not just throwing it in your face to throw it in your face. I'm asking you because I like your palate, and you're one of a few palates that I have things to that I have to run things past, because my palate is not always right at the end of the day. Like, for example, I've got a very high threshold for cinnamon. I like a lot of cinnamon in these like pie beers and stuff, but I think that like I don't start picking up and perceiving it until it's like in a pretty high dose, until it's in a pretty high dose. So if it was just me running all this sensory and I wasn't um, trusting the opinions of the palates around me that I trust, and then I'm just brewing it to my palate, and then I get a bunch of guys saying there's way too much cinnamon in this beer, right? So like there's a certain aspect of it. Like at the end of the day, if you're running the show, you're going to make the call. But as many palates as I can run this thing through and people that I trust, the better for me, because I'm going to take the average of kind of what everybody said, and I'm probably going to do that rather than make it to exactly what I want it to be.
definitely heard. That being said, let's shift the gears a little bit. You just did. Are you wrapping up IPA month for Atrium?
Yeah, we brewed the
Or
last
Hoffman?
IPA of IPA month this past Friday. We thought about calling it Hoppy Month because there's some XPA in there, there's some bright IPA in there, but at the end of the day, the IPA word um, ticks people's boxes. So yeah, we do IPA month this August, and we'll release six brand new IPAs that are all collaborations with other breweries or other suppliers. We got a really cool collab this IPA month. That's a collab with Haas and Omega, which is it's always fun to do something with a supplier as opposed to a brewery, and showcase their products. But yeah, these themed months they're a lot of work, they're a lot of prep, but they perform really, really well for us. And it's always a learning experience. We get to make six brand new IPAs, try some new hop products, try some techniques that some other brewers are doing, and we'll walk away from IPA month with a whole gang of new knowledge on making IPA, because we tried a bunch of shit we never did before.
What was some of the more unique learning moments from this past IPA month run?
One of the big takeaways for me was we did a collab with Project Nine, Jake over at Project Nine, and something we've been striving for years is like this really bright colored hazy IPA that's like just so yellow that it's like almost doesn't look like beer. And Jake suggested running the Wireman Extra Pale Pills, and certainly something that I'd heard before, but in my head I'm like, it's Pilsner malt. Like I'm probably gonna get a pretty close color. Man, we ran that Extra Pale Pills, and this thing is just gonna be unbelievably fucking super light, super just really easy on the eyes, like really fun to look at. Some other fun things. A little bit late to the party, but we did a hot dip on one of these beers. Throwing the flowable incognito or Dynaboost right into the fermenter and knocking hot wort out onto it, letting that sit for 20 minutes, and then knocking out with cold wort on top of that. Um, that's been really great. I've felt like that traps so much more aroma in the fermenter than it does like where then other than like leaving it behind in the kettle. So that's been really cool. And then just experimenting with like new hops and new hop farms. We got to do some stuff with Garston hops. It's like the furthest south hop farm in the world. So they're like 200 miles further south than the closest hop farm in New Zealand. So their like terroir is like it's like New Zealand hops on steroids. It's different. You know, the Nelson Express is different than like it one of the collabs was with a guy who hates Nelson and he loves this Nelson. So just really like being able to work in direct contact with hop farms and dive into how different everybody's crops are is pretty cool. And I think it goes a long way for little small guys like us. You know, we're making 1,200 barrels a year. We don't always get the opportunity to work directly with the farms and get the good shit. And when you're buying a lot of hops on the spot market, they're certainly not the top of the barrel hops, right? So it's been a real eye opener the last couple of years, bringing in some choice hops and seeing like how big of a difference it actually makes on the beers.
Totally. I mean, that was one of the things I learned early on when finally started to get some legit hop contracts. But then that also like came back to bite me in the ass because I had hop contracts.
Right. You commit to all these hops. You know, early on we signed a couple contracts for like Chinook and Simcoe, and we thought we were going to have this malt driven West Coast IPA be a core beer that just never really took off in the modern IPA days. And it took me a year and a half to work through all of that Simcoe. And I was pretty much making beers with Simcoe because I needed to burn through the Simcoe. It was nice. It was good Simcoe, but um, like we've had a few years off of being tied into any hop contracts and a few years of being able to learn and reapproach those contracts as to what are we actually going to run for the next couple of years? What have we really loved that we can't get away from?
So, all right, on to the third installment of beer styles, and which is probably what I drink from you the most is the lagers. And since over the last 12 months that I've been living here and frequently frequently stopping by Atrium, I find myself more
Just
and
so
more.
everybody knows, when Brian shows up to the brewery, he knows exactly what's in every tank. And he shows up and he says, "How's that beer doing?" And he knows.
Yeah, one of the benefits that I've taken away from craft beer is that I love tank beer. There's no better beer than tank beer. So when I'm hanging out at a brewery, I'm always like, what you got in the tank that's close enough to being ready? Give me a color beer. Give me like an almost dropped out, hoppy beer, and that's the vibe. As you were saying before, that Mexican lager, Sombra Mesa, turned out pretty incredible. That's definitely one of my favorites. Past the Pines, which is like the West Coast Pilsner, pretty dank. Skirts the line between, I don't know what is it, cold IPA or lager. I know it carries a lot of noble hop on the hot side, and I know it's kicked up. I know you've changed the hops a couple of times. I think this one is Simcoe and Galaxy. or
The dry hop has always been Simcoe Galaxy Mosaic, and we kind of changed the Whirlpool hop on it depending on what bags of hops we have open. Because once we open a bag of hops to use for the hot side, we will not dry hop with that bag. So if I open a bag, this recent batch was has some Nectaron in the Whirlpool. We had opened a bag of Nectaron for another beer we had, and I'm that bag of hops set cold in the walk-in for a week. Um, it still smells pretty awesome, but I'm just not willing to use it in a dry hop. I'd rather open a clean bag. So we just kind of pick what the Whirlpool hop's going to be based on what bags of cool hops we have open.
cool. What have you learned over the past year? Because like I said, I've congratulated you multiple times this year on the refinement of the lager beers. What are some of your hard takeaways from the last 12 months?
Well, like there's two different directions we can go here. I'm going to start with like
What?
hoppy lager beer because we're talking about like past the pines.
Yeah.
So, hoppy lager beer is such a broad spectrum of beers right now, and I think it kind of plays right into the ever evolving IPA description right now because IPA is just constantly evolving and changing, and um, these hoppy lager beers are kind of fitting into that same realm, like West Coast Pills kind of thing. So, I mean, my one big thing that I've taken away is I've just stopped. So we're a small brew house. We're on a 10-barrel system. We do some 20-barrel batches. And we don't have a big tank farm to allow loggers to sit and lager as long as I think I would like some of them to. So, a lot of our lager program is, we have a year-round Kolsch, we have a year-round American lager, we have a year-round amber lager. These beers are definitely getting biofined and getting, they're not getting 8 weeks of bright time. It depends on the beer, but a lot of these beers are getting biofined and turned and burned and a couple of weeks of lager, and we're burning them. But the big takeaway I found is like when we first started making these like heavily hopped lager beers, I wanted them all to be like crystal clear and beautiful. And so I'm biofining all these things. And we spent so much time like smelling and running sensory and giving tank pours off of these beers after they're cold crashed, and they're like so incredibly aromatic, so incredibly like hop saturated in flavor, and then you send it to bright tank and you biofine it and you make it clear, and a week later you're like, where is my hop character, where did it go? It's all out the window. And I think there's certainly something to be said about finding these dry hopped lager beers. And I think the same thing could be said about if you wanted to send one of these heavily dry hop lager beers to Bright Tank and actually lager it and not fine it and let it sit for the 8 weeks. I think either way, whether you fine it or whether you let it sit in this Bright Tank super cold for a long time, like we are losing hop character 100%. So we send these beers to Bright Tank, and a week later we're like, where's all this beautiful hop character that we just had? It's gone. Like it's still a hoppy beer, but it's not saturated. It's not crazy aromatic. So just getting away from the fining agents and swallowing your pride a little bit, just to say, yes, this cold IPA is not crystal clear, but if it was, it would not taste the way that this does. It's not lazy beer. It's giving you the utmost hop saturation that I can. And when you come back in 3 weeks, it's not going to taste like that anymore. I mean, that cold IPA we put out last week is like just so crazy hop saturated. And like a month from now, we're still going to be drinking it. We're still going to like the beer, but it's not going to be the same beer.
Yeah.
And I think there is something to be said about that. And like, if you're a brewer and you like, if you're sending this super hop saturated dry hop thing to Bright Tank with all these hop products in it, and then you're lagering it until it's crystal clear, you cannot tell me that it tastes as hoppy and awesome as it did the day that you sent it to Bright Tank. It just doesn't.
There was when we did hop compression, the collaboration beer, which is a highly hopped, all noble hop. I believe it was Hallertau, Mittelfru, Saaz, and Tettnang. It's kind of like a
yeah, that sounds right.
triple stacked version of Yacht.
Yeah,
and there
it
was
was like noble hops on crack.
Yeah, but you had a move. I remember there was something you did during the lautering to reduce oxidation in the malt.
Yeah. So we could argue about this for hours, I'm sure. There's some beers we make where we will brew low dissolved oxygen through the entire hot side. So obviously everybody understands that oxygen ruins a beer on the cold side after fermentation. Um, but I think there is something to be said about oxidizing on the hot side as well. So if you and this goes back to like brewing something like Sherman Pills, where we want to like preserve the bready, crackery malt flavor in like a very delicate beer that like it's easy to lose that. It's easy to lose that bready, crackery like malt flavor. So we're spending the money on something like Barca Pills. We are purging the mash tun with CO2 the entire time that we're running off into the grant. There's going to be a CO2 blanket on that grant. There's going to be a CO2 blanket on the kettle during Vorloff, so that wort coming back up, recirculating into the kettle is it's not splashing in oxygen and just oxidizing the malt character. So we do it for a couple different reasons. We also purge the kettle. So like before we even grain in that day, we'll start a purge on that kettle, just like we're purging a bright tank. Because when you rack wort over to that kettle and it's coming out in this like crazy thin layer on the bottom of that kettle, if your atmosphere is 20% oxygen, like it's just there's so much surface area, we're just oxidizing that wort. So we're not doing this for every beer. Okay, we're doing this for beers that like I'm not going to do a core beer this way because it takes a bunch of extra time and a bunch of effort, extra care. But again, for hop compression, for example, we're doing it to save malt character. I want to taste the grain in that beer. That thing was what do we call that? An Imperial Keller Pills.
Yeah,
I think we did, but like that beer, like I want to taste the grain and I want to taste the hop character and I want the super lean, bright color. So we do the Lodo for two different reasons. One is to preserve malt character, like I talked about. The other is to preserve color. So we will Lodo all of our hazy IPA because it saves us probably 2 to 3 shades of color just on the hazy IPA to keep it light and bright and yellow, like the beers I talked about earlier. It's like cutting a banana and leaving it on your counter and then it turns brown. The malt is behaving the same way. So yeah, like special beers, we like to take our time, make sure that this wort never touches oxygen until right before we pitch yeast. And even then, we won't even run oxygen on the stone during knockout until yeast has been pitched. So if we start running knockout and we're 3 barrels in by the time the yeast gets pitched, that's when we start running oxygen, because otherwise the oxygen is sitting in that fermenter cold. The wort is absorbing that oxygen super fast and the yeast aren't there to uptake it. So all it's doing is oxidizing our wort, whether that's oxidizing malt character or whether that's oxidizing hop character. It's either way, it's undesirable. So we will wait until yeast is pitched and integrated, and we feel like if we start running oxygen now, the yeast immediately have access to that oxygen because they will immediately start uptaking that oxygen.
All right, we're going to take a short break for this message and come right back to our conversation with Spencer Guy of Atrium Brewing.
I'm Bradley Zimmerman from Badger Hill Brewing in Shakopee, Minnesota. Malta Mexico 2 is the first of its kind, so I was excited to try it out and see how it performed in the brew house. We had just brewed Mucho Gusto, our Mexican lager, so we used Malta Mexico in our American light lager called Longhorn. Performed well in the brew house. There's a little bit of toasted, flaked rice and then some rice syrup solids in the kettle and a touch of dextrin in the beer as well, and that's it. So it's basically showcasing Malta Mexico 2. We normally use a Pilsner malt in that beer, so we got similar notes to a Pilsner malt, but we got a little bit more cracker out of it. A little bit of not toast and not bread dough, kind of somewhere in between. It had a pleasant sweetness to it, but it wasn't cloying or anything like that. It performed well in the brew house. We hit all our numbers as far as efficiency goes, so we were happy with the results there. If you're doing Mexican style lagers, Malta definitely helps tell the story, especially since it's grown and malted in Mexico. No one's ever done that to this date, so it's fun to get people excited about that process and where things are going. We definitely like to tell that story. Contact Malt Europe today and visit maltingco.com.
It doesn't matter what size your brewery is, 1 barrel or 1,000. Maybe you're in planning. Whatever the size or situation, Ollie has helped brewers save money and become more efficient. The best part? When you're talking to the Ollie team, you're talking to people who have worked in the industry. Learn more about Ollie and how it's transforming breweries everywhere at getollie.com/pod. That's getollie.com/pod.
Welcome back. I'm Brian Strumke from Stillwater, joined with my guest, Spencer Guy from Atrium Brewing in Louisville, Kentucky. Spencer, all right, so we did a little deep dive on some technical knowledge. Let's talk about things. Let's take a little freestyle break. You've been DJing with us a little bit at some of the events. We've been doing some music focused events at Atrium. How's that going in your world? How you feeling about?
It's just fun for me. Like hanging around you guys DJing. I was a percussionist for a really long time, and having a kid, it's not so easy to play a drum set. And I started hanging around you guys and thought, man, that looks like a lot of fun. And bought a little controller and just want to be a hobby DJ for the fun of it. But I was a performer for such a long time, not just drumming. I used to do live art as a living. I used to travel the country doing spray paint art and doing performance based things. So it's just like playing in front of people and doing that as a part of my life that I've been missing for a while, and I didn't really understand how much I've been missing. I started as just wanting to be like a bedroom DJ for the fun of it, but it's a part of my DNA that's reignited a bit, and yeah, it's just been a ton of fun, man.
How important to you do you feel that the guiding of culture is intertwined with craft beer and where it's at and where it's going?
I mean, that's a tough question, Brian. I think it depends on where
Well,
you're at.
I could go a little
Like,
further into it. I think we both. It was interesting to hear you refer to yourself as a performer, and that's what I've always referred to myself as. Within Stillwater, it's designer, whatever. But to me, it's always a performance. It's a bit of performance art, and I think
yeah, I think
cultivating.
we both approach craft beer in the same way from like that, just that kind of that artsy standpoint. And I've been an artist for my entire life. My art is just like kind of liquid now.
Yep. So
It's
where do you see it? So okay. That being said, with your medium being liquid and beverage, uh, you've done pretty great at the styles that you've taken on. I saw um, you scored really high with some barrel aged stouts. You won a gold medal for one of your pastry sours. Um, and that was all in the last 6 months, I believe. Um,
yeah.
what what do you want to do next, and where do you want to take the audience next?
You know, it's a loaded question, Brian, because when I started brewing professionally and I was, really into mixed firm beer and all these niche things. They were hot and you could sell them at the time. And when I came onto Atrium before we opened Atrium, I knew that I was never going to be able to do that. The market was already falling off for these mixed firm beers and Brett Saison, so it was just never something that I really got to focus on. So I really tried to put myself in the mindset of the consumer and brew whatever they want to drink, in a way that I can be proud of it. So some things I'd like to work on soon are like some super low gravity IPA. We do an IPA called Microdose that's 3.5% alcohol. We've been doing it since the day we opened. That beer was a pain in the ass to sell for 3 years, and then all of a sudden it wasn't. And now I get to make it more than once a year. So I think some 2% IPA is in my future. Um, One of my goals as a brewer has always been to coin a new style that other people try to make. You got, cold IPA, which I believe is Natalie from Wayfinder. You got, you had your milkshake IPA era. I still think one of these days I'd like to coin something that sticks. But it's kind of hard when you only make 1,200 barrels a year. It's kind of hard to get it out there to all the people. But and in the same context of that question, we're in Kentucky and we have a very bourbon educated consumer. So, there's always going to be the diehard beer nerds around us, but a big focus for me is getting these bourbon educated consumers that have grown up around bourbon their entire life. They can speak the language and getting them to make a bit of a transition into craft beer, which, as you know, Brian, is a tough thing around here. So maybe I don't know if that's leaning into bourbon barrel aged stout. It's trying to, or bourbon and barrel aged, whatever, but trying to educate your bourbon barrel aged consumer without coming across intimidating or conceited is something that I still strive for and still think about, every day. How do we get these people into it without being an asshole about it or intimidating about it, or
Yeah, it's kind of like it's about presenting something to people that would be intriguing enough for them to come into and explore themselves, while not feeling like they're being force fed. Like
yeah,
something, you have to kind of, I see it through all the arts. It's like you have to position it in a way where it feels very much their own direction and their own uh, at their own accord. Giving them what they need, even though it's not necessarily what they think they want. So,
right.
and that it's not being a trickster, but it's being a tastemaker. I took that from music when I came into beer. It's like sometimes some of the more radical ideas, or even if they're not radical is a loose phrase, but it's like, even though if it's not something that sounds crazy, but it's just like something a little far to the left field, um, you have to lure them in and make it their own journey, and not, you know,
How do we convince these guys? Me and you get together and we make Imperial Keller Pills that's dry hopped all crazy, and it's a showcase of noble hops. There's a handful of people in town who think that's really fucking cool, but how long does that beer sit on draft? How do we get these people that just want to drink a beer that tastes like a raspberry to
well,
care about it,
we just hire a bunch
right?
of celebrities and get them to endorse it. It's an investment.
Yeah,
Uh, we, that's It's something I talked about the other day on a podcast. It's just like hype over substance. Craft
yeah,
beer, just like everything else on social media and popular culture, got was struck by the hype wave. And
yeah.
that shifts attention from quality and integrity to excitement and hype, which is fine, and we see it in every industry. Um, but yeah, I'm just kind of like curious, like, if you could write your own future for where craft beer is going, like you are the man, like you have all the power. You're like for lack of better words, like when Kanye was in his heyday. It's like snap a finger and make things happen. what what style would you unleash uh, fully from
I
yourself?
think I think I still go back to balance and nuance, and a little bit lower gravity, like uh, grisette and Brett table beer and that sort of thing is like always intrigued me. One of my favorite beers in the world is just like a 750 of farmhouse saison with Brett that's low alcohol that you can set on the table and share with friends and spark conversation around
Yeah.
without being cloying, without being too in your face, approachable things. Beer flavored beers. But like I still do have a passion for fruit beers. Like like I say, like there's like fruit beers are fun to make for me. Even if even if I'm not gonna sit around and drink a pint of these beers, like they are fun for me. Um,
Fair enough.
give
What about
give me a target, like it's
well
fun.
what about the I think it was a couple months ago I was at Whole Foods here in Louisville, and to my surprise, I came across 6-pack cans of Bam beer by Jolly Pumpkin from my good friend Ron Jeffries, and I was kind of blown away by how I was slightly scared to see these. I didn't know they were even coming out in cans, but I think I brought some over to Atrium and quite surprised that was always one of my favorite beers on the planet. You know,
Killer,
it ticks all the
killer.
boxes. It's got the funk. It's got enough acidity. It's got enough hop character, and it's bone dry. Um, yeah, I mean, me personally, that would if I could just streamline one style of beer, it would probably be
Yeah.
something similar to the beer I used to make called Premium. Just bone dry, a
It's just
little bit of funk.
it's it's so tough for me because I've dealt so much with this Louisville market and so much in the latter years of, since these, saison and Brett beers and lacto beers have calmed down that it's hard for me to really even get excited about them anymore because I know how they're going to perform.
Yeah.
And it's a different thing if we're gonna make beer in our basement for our kegerator or we're gonna make beer for our consumer. And there's plenty of that style of beer that's on the shelf that I can buy and drink that I like thoroughly, really enjoy. But I try to be pragmatic with myself and like it's not something the things that I love the most are not something that I'm probably ever gonna get to give any attention to, unfortunately. Maybe one day, that would be awesome. But it's tough. So for me, like, just I just want to like again, we only make so much beer. I just want the people who come into my tap room to care about how it's made again, like they used to, and why it's good. And it's a really tough ask.
No, I get that. That was yeah. It's been a moment since I've had really interesting and challenging questions from the audience. Like in the
Right.
world of beer, it's always, oh,
Right.
do you make smoothie sours? Or,
It
like,
seems
no.
to me that like they don't it's they don't really care how you made it, unfortunately, like,
And that
and they just does it taste the way that you said it was gonna taste? Because
and
at
that's
the
one
end
of
of
the
the
things that
day,
yeah, you've always like if you read the description on an Atrium Brewing beer, it ticks the boxes. Like you're never deceiving the audience in that regard, and it's always done to the I watch you. It's like mad consideration for what you think it should be, and also how the audience is going to perceive it. Because you do a good job at serving the audience. Playing for the people. Like in the music, well, as a DJ, it's
right,
like,
right.
are you ignoring the dance floor and just playing what you think people should be listening to, or are you engaging with them and understanding them and feeling their vibe and delivering what you believe
Yeah.
that they want
And
and should be
it
happening?
definitely It's a great analogy, Brian. I mean, it definitely correlates that way. Like you're playing the music for the people who want to listen to your music, right? And like again, I'll go back to it. You can be a jaded brewer and you can say, I'm gonna make this thing that the people want to drink. But if you can't approach it with balance and integrity and nuance and pride, like I want to walk away from that beer and say, I'm fucking stoked on this pineapple upside down cake thing that I made. I only want 4 ounces of it, but I know this thing is going to crush.
Yep.
And like, it's you can be a good brewer and you can also be proud of those beers. I make a I make a lot of really great lager beer. You know what I get interviewed about on podcasts? It's fruited sour beer.
Yep.
Like you just if you can't just be prideful about everything that you put in someone's mouth, what are we doing?
I agree. I think, it's a it's a delicate balancing act, between, what you want to be doing and what other people expect from you as an
And
artist.
you don't get the information either without being the boy and walking around your tap room and talking to your regulars and talking to those people that are spending their money in your brewery. I tell people all the time, people come up to me and they say, "Oh, you're making awesome beer." Da, da, da. I turn around to them and I just say, "Thank you for spending your money with me. We get to chase our dream. We get to do this, follow our passion because you are coming into my tap room and you are spending your money."
True that. True that. It's the dance floor all over again. Well,
Yeah.
we're getting close to our wrap up time. What do you think? Anything you want to talk about? Anything you're particularly excited about?
I'm excited about the wild, wacky world of craft beer to come. It's something new every year right now, and I get excited about taking on new challenges. So, recently just diving into that seltzer world and doing that thing. We've been making a bunch of like hard grape soda and orange soda and
Let's talk
shit
about
like that. We're like,
let's talk about the sodas for a minute because those are pretty
sure.
fantastic. They kind of skirt the lines between um, soda and seltzer beer of sorts. Well, I guess it's more
Yeah.
seltzer.
I mean, it's seltzer at the end of the day. Like, you've got guys all around the country doing, gluten-free sour with seltzer base, and it's just seltzer base that's fruited crazy up and, citric acid made sour. And we've certainly done plenty of that. But, a few years ago, I finally just bit the bullet and swallowed my pride and started making some seltzer base. And, we did some fruited seltzer, we did some gluten-free sour, and then we started doing these sodas. And, you know, if you don't have a gluten-free line on at your brewery, you absolutely should, because especially if it's something you make in house, you're going to make way more margin selling that than the cider you're bringing in from Joe Schmo or the cocktail. Like the margins are great. And the seltzer based stuff has actually been a lot of fun for me. It's been a little break from beer. They're a blank slate to build on. Um, we did some fruited seltzer that, when you do fruited seltzer and you do real fruit and then you call it seltzer, the person who wants to order a seltzer is a little bit confused when you hand them a glass of purple liquid. So we learned that pretty quick, and then we did some gluten-free sour, and then yeah, I started playing around with like, can we just make a hard grape soda out of this? And those things have just been ripping for us. They've been like a lot of fun for me to dive into and make with integrity and nuance and balance. So the seltzer line of or the sorry the soda line of the seltzer base we've been making has definitely performed the best. Um, they're familiar flavors for consumers to engage with. And you know what? If I get a brand new bourbon educated consumer in my tap room because they heard I have a fun hard grape soda on and they have that, and then eventually they drink a beer or two of mine and then they come back, and then I'm stoked. If it took the hard grape soda to get you into my tap room to start tasting through, all the things that we make, I'm all for it.
Oh yeah, yeah. I get that. When dabbling in the hard seltzer category, with sparkling still water. I used all natural fruit, fermented everything completely dry, but it pushed the product into another price category, and it was hard to sell a premium hard seltzer. It's
It's
like,
confusing for the seltzer consumer. It's
yeah,
confusing
like
for them, right?
yeah, it's hard for them to wrap their head around. It's like what, like,
Yeah,
because hard seltzer does have negative connotation to it because it's dominated by the majors like White Claw and stuff. Not that I,
right.
not that I, you won't catch me drinking a White
Yeah,
Claw, but
fuck
it's
around
just
with like
like,
Topo Chico hard seltzer is the shit, dude.
yeah, but that's always just. But I look at them the same way I think the other consumers look at them. It's like I'm not. That's not a premium experience for me. That's just like, oh, I'm at the beach. It's like hot, and I don't want
Mm,
anything with body, but I want a little bit
right.
of booze. So I think the soda thing is an interesting twist, and from what I've tasted, have been extremely successful in their execution. Um, all right.
It's fun, man. It's fun. Like just have fun with it. Like we can be jaded and it's easy to be that way in this industry, It's easy to just be like, here I am making another batch of hard grape soda. But, we could be we could be working in a cubicle.
Absolutely, and I did that before. And I mean, and that's what I love about, and I wanted to bring you on the show. I wanted to I wanted to expose some of the young blood to this line of what seemed to me was a lot of more legacy brewers. So I'm excited to see where you go with this, where you go with your career, um, and everything else.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, Brian. Thanks for picking me. It's an honor. And, you've always been an inspiration. Your beers have been drinking your beer since I was 21 years old.
Thanks, bud. Uh, the universe brought us together for a reason, and here we are. So
That's right.
Spencer will be back in the next episode of this show, hosting a conversation with a brewer of his choosing that will be on air in about 2 weeks. So pay attention to that. As a reminder, visit allaboutbeer.com and follow us on social media to support journalism in the beer space. Check out allaboutbeer.com/support. I'm Brian Strumke of Stillwater. Thank you for listening to the Brewer to Brewer podcast.
This episode was proudly brought to you by Ollie, the brewery software that could save you massive amounts of money and time, just like we did for hundreds of brewers like you in 2024. Make 2025 the year you switch to Ollie and discover why it's the fastest growing brewery software trusted by thousands of brewers across the globe. Visit getollie.com/pod to learn more. One more time, that's getollie, OLLIE.com/pod. Cheers.
I'm Bradley Zimmerman from Badger Hill Brewing in Shakopee, Minnesota. Malta Mexico 2 Row is the first of its kind, so I was excited to try it out and see how it performed in the brew house. We had just brewed Mucho Gusto, our Mexican lager, so we used Malta Mexico in our American light lager called Longhorn. Performed well in the brew house. There's a little bit of toasted, flaked rice and then some rice syrup solids in the kettle and a touch of dextrin in the beer as well, and that's it. So it's basically showcasing Malta Mexico 2 Row. We normally use a Pilsner malt in that beer, so we got similar notes to a Pilsner malt, but we got a little bit more cracker out of it. A little bit of not toast and not bread dough, kind of somewhere in between. It had a pleasant sweetness to it, but it wasn't cloying or anything like that. Performed well in the brew house. We hit all our numbers as far as efficiency goes, so we were happy with the results there. If you're doing Mexican style lagers, Malta definitely helps tell the story, especially since it's grown and malted in Mexico. No one's ever done that to this date, so it's fun to get people excited about that process and where things are going. We definitely like to tell that story. Contact Malt Europe today and visit maltingco.com.